Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1761A, and today's date is January 9th, 2019, and the title of the episode is The World Just Woke Up, Coincidence Part of the Plan. Now, before I get started, I wanted to talk about Trump. You might have heard in the news that President Trump is withdrawing 2,000 of our boys and girls out of Syria. Just a while ago, he took an 11-hour flight in darkness and total secrecy to go out to Iraq with First Lady to visit the troops there. He said, "We're no longer the sucker, folks," was his storming declaration. With President Trump, you get what you see, and that's what we love about him. He delivers. So does Noble Gold. They put together this stunning solid silver coin to underline that great job he's doing, with highlights of his achievement to date and a portrait on the front. Any Trump supporter would be crazy about one of these. Go to TrumpCoin2020.com and use the code X22 to get free shipping. This is a $6.50 savings. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we knew the entire plan rests on the fact that certain people are going to be arrested. There are many indictments. Everything's being put into place. And then there's the central bank. And there's not much talk about the central bank and the Fed and all of it, the Rothschild. We had a couple posts with Q pointing this out. And what's very interesting is that in France with the yellow vests, where this awakening is happening and it's spreading around the country, something else is about to happen. And this has nothing to do with fuel tax or anything like that. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later in this report. But first, I want to go to the Brexit here with Theresa May. And it looks like there are problems here. Now, she is trying to get this deal passed. Remember, this is a central bank deal. This is nothing that the people want. And she's having problems. Now, we know she's called for a vote. Will they vote on this and say this is the plan? Most likely not. And they're trying to block May any way they possibly can. Now, what has happened here, there was a Grieve Amendment which was opposed by May's government. This amendment would effectively prevent May from running out the clock to Brexit Day, which was believed to be her primary tactic for coercing MPs to supporting her deal. And it looks like they're trying to stop her at every turn. And will they be able to do this? Who knows? But we could see right now the people, they're trying to tell her, and she doesn't care because she's already made the deal with the central bank, and the central bank is saying there are no other deals. They only care about themselves. They don't care about what the people want. And this is completely evident when you look at France and you look at many of the other countries. And we'll have to see as we tick down to that day, the 15th of January, we'll have to see how this all plays out. And we'll have to see if she's able to get this passed, which at this point, I don't believe they will, unless they blackmail certain individuals to get this through. Because right now, from the voting, we can see that they're always, this last amendment, it was 308 votes in favor and 297 against. So they already have the votes to stop her. I don't even think she's going to have the votes to get this through. Now, here in the United States, we understand that people are living on credit. And we need to remember how the central bank system actually works here. When the central bank system began in the 70s, when I'm talking about going off the gold standard, I'm not talking about 1913. When we officially went off the gold standard and they started to create currency like crazy. Back then, people were still able to use cash to purchase things. But as the value of that paper currency, that central bank note, continually declines, the central bankers have to rely on what's called credit, because they know their paper debt notes, they don't hold value anymore. And you need more and more of these debt notes to purchase things. This is why over a very long period of time, and if we go prior to 1970, you can see how people back then, there were no such thing as credit cards. People, if they wanted something, they just used cash. Yes, in certain times they would need credit, but most of the people, they would use cash. They would use coins because they had value. Once the central bankers took hold of the system, the currency lost value very, very quickly, and they had to turn to something called credit. And all of a sudden, in the 70s, moving into the 80s, you saw credit open up. It wasn't like it was, like this was a miracle. This is something they had planned for. They needed it because as the value of the dollar declines, credit becomes more and more available because they have to offset what is happening in the economy. Think about it today, right now. To purchase anything, and I'm talking about the big ticket items, I'm already starting to see the smaller type of items. They're saying you can finance it now, which is just completely unbelievable. But you need to take a loan out to purchase a home, a car, furniture, a washer, dryer, because what's happening with most people is that as the value of the dollar declines, loses its value, it takes more of those dollars to pay for the same item. And the only way people can afford it is to use credit. Salaries have not been keeping up with the declining dollar. I'm talking the value of the dollar. So as it continually loses its value, your wages are pretty much staying the same or declining, and maybe some instances moving up a little bit to try to keep up with inflation. But that's not enough. It's not enough, so people have to resort to credit. And what are we seeing right now? We are seeing right now that there has been a surge in consumer credit. More and more people need to use credit to get by every single day. And the Fed has reported that in November, the surge of consumer credit continued, rising by $22 billion above the $17.5 billion expected. Now, when we look at this, the surge in borrowing right now in November brought the total up to $3.979 trillion. This is an all-time new high. And when you look at automobiles, you look at student loans, you see the same exact thing. People, to go to college, they have to take out loans. To purchase a car, you have to take out loans. In the past, many people were able to purchase their cars with cash. Today, it's completely impossible. Even if you are buying an inexpensive car, it's very difficult for people to purchase that car with cash because the value of the dollar has decreased so much. The system that we're in, this central bank system, is coming to an end. And this is what we see. Now, what's very interesting is that Fitch is threatening to cut U.S. credit rating. Now, we need to go back to the time that Obama was in the White House, and we had Tim Geithner, who was there also. And back then, S&P, they did the unthinkable, and they cut the credit rating for the United States. And Obama, Tim Geithner, they went after them. And they said, absolutely not, you are not going to do this. Fitch right now, they're saying the same exact thing. We would like to downgrade the U.S. Now, the U.S. should have been downgraded a long time ago. This is because of the debt problem. This is what Fitch said. I think people are looking at the CBO Congressional Budget Office numbers. If people take the time to look at what you can see, debt levels moving higher, you can see the interest burden in the U.S. government move decidedly higher over the next decade. This is coming from James McCormick, Fitch Global Head of Sovereign Ratings. There needs to be some kind of fiscal adjustment to offset that, or the deficit itself moves higher and you're essentially borrowing money to pay interest on the debt. So there's a meaningful fiscal deterioration there going on in the United States. Now, this just didn't happen today. This has been going on for a very long time because this is how the central bank system works. The United States should have been downgraded a long time ago. And the Obama government, they stopped them from doing it. How do we get out of this mess? We need to get rid of the central bank. It always comes back to the same exact thing. To get rid of the debt, to get out of this system, you need to destroy the central bank system. The central bank system is a no-win scenario. There's no way out of this because the first dollar that the government borrows has interest attached. So you're always borrowing to pay for that interest. It's impossible to ever pay all of this off because when the Fed creates the first dollar, loans it to the government, United States government, it's $1 and let's say 10 cents worth of interest. Where does the government, the people, get the 10 cents if that is the first dollar? Nowhere, because there's doesn't exist. So they have to go back to the Fed and say, you know something? We need another dollar because we owe you the interest. So they take that dollar and they pay them the 10 cents. But now the U.S. government has $2. And now there's interest once again. And they have to borrow again. And this cycle continues. Now we're trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. It's a no-win situation. But we know from Q, there's an awakening going on. We know the people around the world are going to start to point the finger. It's already begun. Now, the yellow vests, they are protesting in France. And reports are emerging that the yellow vests, they are planning to stage a bank run over the weekend. Now, what does that mean? They are planning to take money out of the banking system. This is what they're saying. For Act 9, we will scare the state legally and without violence. We all know that the powers of the country are not in the hands of the government, but in those of the banks. If the banks weaken, the state weakens immediately. Saturday, we will all vote by withdrawing our money to impose the RIC, Referendum Citizen Initiative, urgently. The operation is scheduled for Saturday, January 12th at 8 a.m. It will be reproduced the following month in case of failure. So they're planning to hit the government hard, sending a message that we're done with all of this. They know the banks control everything, which is really the central banks. But France, where do they get their funds from? Well, the ECB. The United States has a central bank here in the country, the Fed. Now, if we go back to Q's post 2530, this was December 2nd, 2018. Q says, what you are witnessing in France has nothing to do with gas. Brackets, bold, forced narrative. Vive la France. The people are pointing the finger. The people know who's responsible for all of this. And we know with government, with the central bank, put those together, you get corruption. You get the deep state. You get the elites. And the people in France know this. Now, once they start doing this, hopefully, and I think it will start to spread to other countries. I wouldn't be surprised if Italy joins in. And then it moves to other countries. And people are going to start to catch on. Now, Macron, he's going to try to do everything he possibly can to stop this because he knows if this goes any further, this is going to be a major, major problem. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you see the banks shut down and don't allow anyone to take their funds out of the bank. Now, again, everyone thinks the money in the banks really belongs to you. But if you read a lot of the terms of service from the banks, it's really not your money. And the banks, they have the option of shutting down, not allowing you to take out your own money. I mean, we saw this happen in Cyprus. We saw it back then when the people said, hey, I want to go take out my funds. The banks were on bank holiday. We'll have to see what happens over the weekend. The question is, will the banks allow this? We know they don't have the cash on hand. A lot of it's digital. So there's no way they can hand out that much cash. Will they shut it all down and say, you know something? We just put limits. You only can take out 50 or 100, whatever their limit's going to be. It has begun. People are pointing the finger at the banks. That's the real problem. The central banks. That's the real problem. This is going to spread. And before you know it, there's going to be a movement. There's going to be a transition out of the central bank system. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.